All right, guys. So I've got Michael back in the channel, and me and Michael have gone a long way back. Um, as you know, I've grown. When I first met Michael, I was on 23,000 followers. Now I'm on 31,000. And as I've grown, I think, Tokenise and what they're doing, they're growing as well. So, we've gone a long way back when we first met in the early days when crypto was just, we were all trying to learn all about it. What's going on with the exchanges? What's going on with the regulation? What's going on with the adoption? And as you know, I love telling stories. I love sharing passion. And one of the things is I'm doing a follow-up interview with Michael about Tokenise. And as you know, I've grown quite a big brand since I last spoke to Michael, but I love meeting people who want to share their story and also tell all the entrepreneurs, all the people I know about Tokenise and what they're doing. So Michael, it's great to have you. Just want to make a quick disclaimer, it's not financial advice. This is just purely an educational video interview to tell people all about what Michael is doing at Tokenise. So take this as an educational piece of content. Michael, it's great to have you.
Thanks very much for having me.
Great. So Michael, we went back, I think, a year ago. You were talking to me about Tokenise. I've got a bit of an audience now, which has grown quite fast. And there's going to be a lot of people tuning into this. First things first is, what brought you into this field? And, we did touch upon what we spoke about Tokenise in the early days, but what brought you into this field and how are you trying to make Tokenise a success?
So what brought me into the field is actually back in 2015, we wanted to create a secondary market for crowdfunding.
Right.
So I always describe crowdfunding as the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never leave. So what we wanted to do is see how we can create a secondary market so that people, if they want to exit their investments, they can do that. And we wanted to do that using blockchain technology. So what this has done is over the years, obviously we've seen the growth of the crypto markets and how that's facilitated everything. And we thought, actually, what's happening within the crypto markets, not necessarily everything being great there, but how we can apply that to a regulated world and a world
very true
securities. So what we've done is we've taken some of the kind of traditional methods and some of the new methods and combine them to come up with a kind of hybrid solution for a stock exchange. So we only focus on securities. We don't touch crypto at all, but we use the technology of crypto to ensure that we can actually be fully compliant with the securities regulations.
Very good answer there. And I think, one thing I like is that transparency, is that we need regulation. There's no way around it. It has to come, and it's slowly coming, but the regulators are taking their time. And I think a lot of crypto enthusiasts and a lot of friends of mine in this field, they all agree that, regulation is important. You would say so, yes?
100%. So I think around the world, I think what's happened with the ICO boom and potentially bust, I think that's what it's led to. It's led to the necessity to have regulation. So I think the industry that I come from and I've been working in for donkey's years has always been in the regulated space. So I actually think that regulation can be our friend, but as our chairman says, it's all about intelligent regulation. So it's not just about having regulation for regulation's sake, it's to protect investors and also to protect issuers. So if they can combine those things and actually do things in an orderly fashion, I think that the scope is immense.
Very true.
We welcome regulation, but it has to be for the right reasons rather than just for regulation's sake.
Right, I've got many friends in this area, a lot of entrepreneurs. As you know, my brand has scaled since we last spoke, and it's scaling fast. All the people who are tuning in, we're talking about Tokenise, right? We're talking about your exchange, which you're going to launch, and we'll probably discuss that in the next interview. But what are the new developments that have occurred? Let's go down to the basics. What are the new developments that have occurred, and what can you tell my audience tuning in?
Absolutely. So Tokenise is a regulated stock exchange over in the Caribbean. So we actually applied for a license back in 2018,
Right.
and we were awarded the license in 2019. So that's a full digital stock exchange license to do tokenized securities. The other thing that we did is in 2020, January, we got awarded our broker license in Barbados as well, which allows people to access the market directly. So instead of going through a broker like Barclays or Charles Schwab or whoever it ends up being, you can actually do it straight through our platform. So we control the end-to-end solution, which just makes entry a lot easier. We've also got an FCA regulated entity that will act as an introducer broker.
Amazing, because I haven't heard this a long time, and a lot of people I've spoken to, they're making, building their exchanges, but they're not going through the FCA regulated path. Some of them anyway, but it's a hit or miss. Yeah.
I think the difficulty is most people who come from a crypto background struggle with regulation around securities.
Right.
So, and the regulators don't necessarily look upon them in the same way that they look upon people who have been in the securities industry. So I think the advantage that we have in that score is we've always been in the regulated industries, and we kind of fell into crypto. But I think in terms of the developments that we're doing, I think that there's so many kind of aspects as to how to use this technology. And just to explain it very briefly, if you have an equity, a share in something, what happens is that share is held in what's called a depository. So effectively, the share itself stays put, and the legal title for that share stays put as well. What we then do is we create a token that represents a share. So every share that we produce a corresponding token.
Right.
And what happens is whoever trades the token is the ultimate beneficial owner of that share. And it doesn't have to be shares. It can be bonds. It can be funds. It can be commodities. We're also talking about fractional ownership of real estate or any assets. And
you tie that to the token as a collateral, or?
Yeah. So all the tokens are security tokens, and they're not utility tokens.
And they're not difference.
And they're not a currency, correct?
Right. So that's where the regulation and that compliance sort of comes in that zone, because it's security. To all my audience, we're talking about Tokenise. What is it that you've done in the last few quarters that has grown the brand? Let's talk about the brand. Let's get people tuned in, to all my followers. How has the brand grown in the last few quarters, and what's new for people who want to learn about the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the company itself, we obviously had to go through the whole iteration and regulation. We've launched in terms of we're open for business, but we're not yet trading on the exchange. So what that means is if people want to come to us and they want to do a full kind of listing on a stock exchange for one of these kind of slightly more esoteric type offerings, then we can facilitate that. And in terms of, we're talking to 32 clients at the moment who are looking at listings, anything from listing property to wind farms to solar farms.
So different things you're doing, not only just crypto, but you're targeting different areas for the average audience to know.
Correct. So we're not targeting crypto at all, but it's all about companies who would want to list on a stock exchange, but they don't necessarily want to list on a traditional stock exchange because it's so expensive, and it's slightly outdated in terms of the amount of intermediaries that you need to use, etc. So we've got a pipeline of about $1.3 billion worth of companies that we're talking to. I'm not saying all of them are going to list with us, but I think there's some really interesting things from content management companies, social media. There's e-gaming, there's influencer
So there's
models.
many different assets.
Yeah, we're asset,
Open.
we're agnostic. So
Right.
we're industry agnostic and we're also jurisdiction agnostic. So if someone wants
Very
to list
good.
something from Vietnam, and we are talking to someone who's got a sports village that they're building in
Wow.
Vietnam, up to a medicinal cannabis plantation.
Wow. For the average audience, that's quite ambitious, an ambitious project, I would say, because it's not only crypto, you're doing the whole 9 yards, it seems, and you're targeting many different industries. So I suppose you're going to grow like that, right? You're going to make it something worthwhile.
Absolutely. If you look at something like the London Stock Exchange, it's got everything from British Telecom to tobacco companies, to oil companies, to mining companies. So it's the whole gambit of industries. So we're not specific to say that we can only deal with people in, say, the blockchain world.
Right.
We can deal with people in the blockchain world, but we can also deal with someone who has a oil refinery in Kuwait.
Okay, very, very interesting, very interesting. So for the audience, just a quick recap, Michael. Just break it down quickly, sort of in a couple of sentences, just for the audience to know what is Tokenise. I know we've gone through it, but just a quick recap, so for the average person who's just trying to learn about it.
Yeah, so Tokenise is a regulated stock exchange. So everyone who comes onto the stock exchange has to go through a full process in order to make sure that whatever they're listing on the stock exchange has passed all the due diligence, they've got a prospectus, and that people who are buying into their products, we've done some due diligence, the regulators checked it out, and also the corporate advisor. So there's a full kind of end-to-end system so that people can list their products, raise capital, but the most important thing is once you've raised that capital, then they can trade those units, those digital units or tokens in the secondary market. And that's really important because that gives people the ability to, they might make a profit, they might make a loss depending on the value of their token and the volatility, but it gives them an exit. And instead of just investing in something where there is no secondary market, the ability to actually come out of an investment is really important to people.
And so is the security element, as you briefly touched upon as well, which everyone, I suppose, you would wholeheartedly agree on.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think there's, in terms of the security of the actual exchange itself, they need to know that it's all a robust system, which it is. The people that are building our tech, they've built 12 stock exchanges around the world. So we work kind of hand in glove with them. We are designing the system. They already have some protocols, but we are combining some of the traditional technologies that they use on every stock exchange, which include things like fixed protocols and stuff, with blockchain technology, which is obviously where the units and some of the settlement occurs.
So to all my followers, you know, Michael's doing as an ambitious project, I would say, and you know, he's targeting different areas, you know, to make this quite a big ordeal, make you know, Tokenise grow. I just want to quickly, before we move on to the next question, why not crypto? I mean, obviously, it's something you might be looking into, but what's the push?
So realistically, we had a conversation with the regulator, and they said, if you're going to do crypto, you do crypto. If you're going to do securities, you do securities. And if
one or the other.
They wanted one or the other, not to create confusion, because I think the difficulty is, if you think about it, if you go to the London Stock Exchange, just as an example, or New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, wherever
you want to go,
you don't expect to be able to buy some cryptocurrencies. I'm not saying that you can't buy some derivatives in them and options and futures in those instruments, but they then become a security in themselves. The actual trading of the crypto, we leave to the crypto exchanges because that's their expertise. Our expertise is in the
Completely
regulated
different.
securities industry.
Okay, great. Would you look into that later down the line when it becomes more and more open and more adopted? Because it seems that the market cap is growing. Yeah.
I think it's potentially as a way of payment. At the moment, we're only dealing with fiat.
Right.
So in the future, whether or not we can add crypto, we'd have to discuss it with the regulator and make sure that they're comfortable with it. But I think in the not too distant future, I think that could be an option that we would look at.
That's all good and clear to me. So, Michael, so the next question is, what's down the pipeline? You know, what's next for Tokenise? Obviously, we'll talk about, you know, in the next interview, how your trading volume is going, how you're being developed. But what's next in the pipeline? What's going on with that, so you can tell my audience?
Absolutely. So at the moment, we are still doing a capital raise. Unfortunately, with COVID, it's been a bit delayed.
Things down, yeah.
Everything has been delayed, including the listings, and so down the pipeline, we expect to launch on the actual platform around September, October time. But what we're doing is, in order to get that lead time, we're taking companies through the process now who want to have a listing. Because if you think about it, by the time you've gone through the whole process of doing a prospectus, doing all the due diligence and making everything kind of investor ready, that process in itself is going to take several weeks, several months. Exactly. So we're open for business in terms of taking listings on board. We want to launch with, say, 3, 4, 5 quality listings. It's all about quality and reputation and trust.
How many listings do you have? Are you sort of, just to tell the professionals and people who are following me who might want to look into Tokenise and get in touch with yourself, how many listings have you grown over time?
So we're in very advanced talks with 3 companies, but in total we're talking to 32 at the moment.
And which area? Just a quick one.
So the ones we're talking to, one is a fund that that actually trades off football results. So that could be an interesting one. We're talking to a content management system. We're talking to a retail bond provider, and we're talking to some people in the kind of medicinal cannabis industry. We're talking to people who want to tokenize property. We've got a couple of projects that hopefully going to launch with us quite soon. So it's really across the entire kind of spectrum. I mean, I'm talking to someone later today who wants to tokenize their rum production facility.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's interesting.
So exactly, we have to get samples in place. But I think it's really across the whole spectrum. And then our view is we want to be regulated in several different markets around the world. We want this to be a truly global product and turn it into a global stock exchange. A bit like Amazon is a global exchange for buying and selling goods, and eBay, there's almost a kind of
place for buying and selling.
Market. Exactly. So we want to be, I know it's an ambitious statement, but we would like to be the Amazon of the securities industry.
Wow. Okay. And I suppose telling all the people following me, that's quite ambitious, Michael. Where would you say you're going down now in the next 6 months? Before we finalize this interview, where are you going to go in the next 6 months? And what can you tell my business professionals and people tuning in?
Yeah, I think over the next 6 months, we expect to have a number of listings. We've got a number of corporate advisors that include law firms, regulated firms, and they take you through the listing process. Right. I expect over the next 6 months that we will have
growth happening over time. Do you see yourself becoming more and more? Obviously, the platform's not launched until September, October, but how do you see your growth until then? Is it?
Yeah, definitely. I think we're talking to all the right people. We're talking also to governments and local governments about tokenizing community assets. And so for example, local councils, whether or not they tokenize some of their property interests. to raise capital, but also give something back to the community so that they own part of what they're investing in. So we're talking about some fairly large scale projects, both in the UK and abroad. I think over time, we will see more and more capabilities in terms of listing. And then it's obviously the ability, a bit like what you're doing. We're talking to some people who have like an Instagram following of millions and millions of people. If we can tap into those millions of followers and get them to invest in the person they're following, then that becomes exponential. And obviously over time, it drives liquidity.
That's the next marketing tool, I think. And that's also very helpful for the company.
Absolutely. So we're talking to a number of fairly high profile people as well. Obviously, it's a chicken and egg scenario. People want to see that there are listings and that those things are going well. And then we will find more people want to come to us for a listing itself. So we're building up the database slowly. But we are making sure that anyone who does want a listing, that we can help them out. But there are obviously minimum conditions that they have to reach as well.
Great, Michael. So it's great to have you. What a amazing interview. It's good to hear all about what Tokenise is doing, and I like the fact that you're taking action, which is very important. Going through that regulatory route. What excites you? What gets you out of bed? And obviously, I've seen your passion. For people who are following me, do get in touch with Michael. Or when I do post this, do get in touch with him. I'm sure we'll make a few introductions down the line because I'm connected to a lot of people. But what gets you out of the bed? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
I love the idea of democratizing the capital markets. And at the moment, I've been involved in capital markets for ages, but for people to actually be able to liquidate or raise capital for their companies, we target the SME sector. We need the big stuff to the big exchanges. And I think by being able to help them, and you just hear about so many different business models, and it's not just that, it's how you can help structure something so that you can do it slightly differently. So for example, a bond normally pays interest on a coupon on a periodic basis. With COVID and stuff, that's a real problem because they don't have the money to pay that interest payment. So we've developed a product called a royalty token where they can base it on, say, revenue or profits. So if they're profitable, they pay out. If they're not profitable, they don't pay out, which especially for the startup companies or even established companies, it goes with the times. I always use the analogy, I'd rather own 1% of the profits of Apple rather than 1% of the shares of Apple. That way I'm in control. I know exactly what I get every year and what I'm entitled to. Whereas if I just own 1% of the equity, then I'm subject to whatever the directors decide to do with those dividends and stuff.
Amazing. And I think it's good to narrow down to the audience, because obviously people are still trying to learn about the tokenization of the world, and what you guys are doing, because we've briefly gone through everything. Just a quick recap and a very final question. Do you believe in tokenization of the world? Do you believe that things are going to be, I've been hearing it, from different parties and different groups. Do you see everything being tokenized?
Not everything. I think people overplay it, to be honest, and they talk about the hundreds of trillions of assets that will be tokenized. I think the reality is blockchain technology will assist in a lot of those processes and get rid of a lot of the intermediaries and drive down costs.
Yes.
But realistically, I don't think you're going to tokenize everything, and nor should you, because over time, you want some of those products to be focused on what are the benefits of tokenization? How does that actually drive change, and how does it facilitate markets? It's no point just creating a token for token's sake.
True.
And I think some people...
We need to move away from that and more into more concrete sort of models, right? Like gold or real estate or sports or...
Correct. So
Not just
I think,
art or photography or anything, right? So
no, exactly. So I think there's some things that if you are transacting financial services or records of data are brilliant to be tokenized, because that's a real kind of methodology for how to do something. But you've also got to be mindful about things like, for example, if you tokenize a person and their earnings potential,
right.
you've got to be careful of things like the Modern Slavery Act.
Okay.
So because if you tokenize a person and their income and they're subject to doing what other people say, then there could be a problem.
Yeah.
You've got to take all these things into consideration. So it becomes a bit of a minefield. So at the moment we're saying, let's stick to corporates, let's stick to assets, physical assets over a certain value. So we're kind of saying people who want to raise $5 million or more on the platform, then they should come to us and speak to us, and we can help them. But I think residential property, for example, I would never suggest that is tokenized.
All right, there you go, guys. So this was just a quick, simple overview of what you guys are doing at Tokenise and the company. And you know, do follow Michael. I'm going to leave a link of his company and where to follow him on LinkedIn. Michael's great to have you. You know, it's been a while back, and I'm so glad that, you know, you're progressing forward. Hopefully we can do a follow-up in October sometime and talk about what's next.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Michael. And thanks very much for the interview. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.